I'm going to, first, we'd like to acknowledge the many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which we are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that our watershed forms a part of the treaty and traditional territory of the southeastern Anishinaabeg. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we live and work. To honor this legacy, we commit to being stewards of the natural environment and undertake to have a relationship of respect with our treaty partners. So before we get started, we've got some guests here and we have a new director. So I thought maybe we just go around the table. Pat Warren, I'm chair.
Mark Mahersky, I'm the CAO.
I'm Kriya Pettingale. I'm a counselor in Brock Township.
And this is Ashton Knopfs. She's our environmental intern for the city of Kawartha Lakes. And she's getting all sorts of good information from different areas of the municipality. And I invited her today, so.
Christy Virgo, I'm the interim director of planning and development.
I'm Wanda Stephen. I'm the interim director of corporate services.
Barry Byrne, out of Cavan, Monaghan Township.
Peter Franson, Councillor Trent Lake.
Mark Doble, just recently elected councillor for Ward 5, City of Kawartha Lakes.
Way to go.
Yay.
Congratulations.
And Tracy Richardson Warding.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so first off, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Okay, Jerry and Tracy, all in favor? Carried. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? None seen. Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes of February 2025? Jerry, Kriya, all in favor? Carried. Any business arising from those minutes? None seen. We don't have a deputation today. So we're on to number 6, presentations and applicable action items, spring outlook and flood forecasting update. Nathan. Come on. Oh, here you go. No, it's not. So
Oh, really?
Is this good? Should I make
In a
it
way.
here?
And I,
wherever you want, where you're comfortable.
Okay. All right, so through you, Madam Chair. So I'm back again just to provide an update on our recent watershed conditions, as well as some of the changes we've seen in our water levels, as well as sort of an outlook as to where we're going in the next couple weeks. So since we last talked, we have experienced a significant rise in a lot of the water courses within our watershed, primarily within our lakes. We've also seen a large amount of rain in the last couple of weeks. We did have that big ice storm that came through that brought a lot of precipitation, as well as in the following days there was more events that brought more rain. Now, this recent ice storm did cause a lot of damage in our park, as well as also contributed to more water in our streams and our lakes. In addition, there was also a heavy rainfall event that occurred, as I mentioned, on April 2nd and 3rd, that also contributed a large amount as well. So currently, for this time period, March, April, the average amount of rain is usually 60 to 75 millimeters, whereas as you can tell by this graph here, we did receive a lot. And that was actually just from our last meeting, our last board of directors meeting. So yeah. So I just wanted to quickly provide some some photos from that ice storm. On the left there is our road here at Ken Reed, which saw a lot of damage, trees down and everything. But not only our roadways, our trails got hit pretty hard from that ice storm. And then on the right is Mariposa Brook, located in Little Britain, which is one of the streams we monitor, and it also saw a big jump in water level following the events. So just before I go into streams, I just want to talk about the lakes, as they were the sort of the most impacted part of our watershed, or at least water course, from the recent rise in water levels. Now typically lakes take longer to fill when compared to streams, which are more reactive to large events. But in our case, a large contributor to our water level increases was from northern tributaries, primarily Burnt River and Gull River, which at the time they were still experiencing a lot of snowmelt. And when you pair up snowmelt with more rain, it just amplifies the amount of water entering into their water courses. So we saw a big influx in our lake levels as a result from that. So as you can tell, Balsam Lake reached near the critical level that we have established, as well as some of the other lakes got fairly close, such as Sturgeon, which is in yellow, which is kind of hard to see, as well as Pigeon, Skookog. So yeah, thankfully, Trans-Urban Waterway is continuing to look at these levels and monitor and manage dams and so forth, as we see these high levels continuing. So I just also wanted to show some photos from one of our flood patrols that we did. We basically wanted to go out and canvass the lakes, see where they're at, and try to get some high water marks. So this is actually the boat launch in Port Perry. I think it's called the Old Rail boat launch. Yeah, it was fairly high there. I think it was 44 centimeters above Trent Severn's capacity level, which is basically their determining level for, if they reach that point, it's going to be very hard for them to start moving water through the system. They get kind of bottlenecked in that sense. So just wanted to show that. And then as well in Port Perry, another place we visited was the Joe Fowler Park, which is just sort of south of the previous one. And we noticed that there was some water breaching the shoreline and entering into the trails nearby the park, which thankfully did recede in the following days. So yeah. So moving to our streams and rivers. So we have seen some significant spikes in water levels in some of our more reactive streams, Blackstock Creek and Mariposa being two of them. There's that dashed line down the middle. That was our previous board meeting, and I just kind of want to throw that in for reference. A few days after that is when that whole ice storm came. We saw a lot of rain, so those jumped, but thankfully they did recede after. But looking to Burnt and Gull, they saw two large peaks in the last little bit, well above critical for Burnt. And that was again primarily from the snowmelt and the rain that sort of compounded, if you will. Gull River also recently saw some high flows for the same reasons, and thankfully they are starting to slow down, and it is anticipated that they're going to not necessarily peak as high, but maintain sort of where they're at until things start to settle down. So yeah.
That's critical.
So in response to these recent changes, we have continued to notify the public of conditions, as well as our municipal members. Since our last discussion, we have issued one watershed condition statement, one flood watch, and most recently a series of flood warnings, which have been extended a few different times, just to help notify the public about the water levels in the lakes primarily. Streams seem to settle down, but the lakes are still high. As of Tuesday, we did downgrade to a flood watch.
That's good.
As lake levels, while still remaining high, have begun to recede. And with reduced inflows from Gull and Burnt River in the next little bit, we should hopefully start to see our lake levels dropping. And the word recently, as of yesterday, from Trent Severn is that the lakes are going to start receding. They're expecting that to occur starting next week, hopefully. So good news there.
That's good.
During this time, we also did receive a lot of calls from the public, which were all responded to, and I provided as much information to our municipalities on their concerns. A lot of people experienced lawns being flooded over, boathouses being kind of flooded, and then a few people who did get flooding in the basement, and as well as crawl spaces and stuff. But since then, it's been remediated, if you will. So yeah, as we continue into spring, again, we're foreseeing that this will slow down and start to settle off. Again, it's very much so dependent on the weather. If we're going to be getting a lot of rain, then things might change. But from just my short experience with this, I would say that we're starting to head into the clear. So that's basically where we're at with that. And yeah, I'll continue to communicate with partners and attend meetings just to make sure that we're getting up to date info. So
Thank you. Are there any questions of Nathan? Yep, Priya?
Thank you, and through you. Thanks for the presentation. Do you know how thick the ice was in places that it's thickest? On a branch kind of thing?
I mean, it was very thick. I know we did get some photos.
I got a couple too.
Yeah, 42 millimeters is what John's saying. So
How thick is that? How was that?
yeah, it's about like
An inch.
More than an inch.
Yeah.
More than an inch?
more than an inch. Yeah.
And so like if every branch had that on it, it's a huge amount of water.
Yeah, and it,
And
you know,
weight.
it melted very quickly. Like I would say maybe 2 to maybe even just 2 days after it was primarily gone. So you can only imagine all that water's entering into the streams. The soil was already saturated, so it's essentially just running off right into the streams. Yeah, it's a lot of ice.
Also, I mean, I don't expect you to know this, and maybe we heard a bit, but what sort of causes such a massive ice storm like that?
There's the question of the,
That's a tough
Yeah.
question. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Yeah,
I would say temperature is probably.
I know he's not a meteorologist.
Yeah.
so I was actually interesting. I was on the Federal Climate Caucus call last week, and there was a fellow from the insurance industry. So they were asking questions like that. I did anyway, and he was from out east, but his parents lived on Balsam Lake. So he was, yeah, and so I asked if, is that climate change related? Is that kind of an atmospheric river? Because when you looked at it, it was just bang, right there. It wasn't going to move, and it just kind of stayed. And it looked like an atmospheric river. So they're not, he kind of hummed and hawed around it, but could be actually due to climate change. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out.
Yeah, I mean, seems like these storms are occurring more often. We had the Derecho, you remember that? Or however you pronounce it, definitely caused a lot of damage. In this instance, we had sort of already charged lakes, charged streams, high water levels. So having that large amount of precipitation on top of it, plus more snow melt from the north, it all just comes flowing into our water bodies. So that's why we saw such a drastic jump, if you will.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay. Can I have a motion to receive Nathan's presentation? Priya and Peter, all in favor? Carried. Good. And you're on again. 1.1.1.
Thank you, guys.
Spring outlook and flood forecasting update. Again. So I guess that's all together. It's 6.1 and 6.11. Okay, so we're done with that. There are two motions here, though.
You can pass it as one motion if you.
I just pass it as one motion.
Yeah.
That's fine. Okay. Okay, 6.2, ice storm impacts and recovery. Mark?
I will see if that little device works in my corner there. So this presentation is just talking a little bit about the ice storm and its impact on our office and operations that we have in some of the services that we provide. Oh, yeah, it works. I just have to go the other way. No, it was me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was good.
Look how thick, yeah, look at that.
There it is.
There we go.
They look like worms.
So yeah, just talking a little bit about the ice storm, it was March 28th, right about the same time that we had already had a flood condition statement out. And of course, with this amount of precipitation in the form of ice in this case across most of our watershed, we did have several impacts to the operations that we had. The storm was identified by Environment Canada as a major ice storm, so it was pretty significant for a couple of days. The exacerbating piece was we also had strong winds at the same time, so that also increased loads, especially when they're already full of ice. Or brought down some more trees in the mix just due to a lot of the strain that was already on the branches. There were about 350,000 customers without power in Ontario as well. We were one of those customers, which I'll talk about in a couple other slides as we go along. Before I do that, there you have a picture, courtesy of John, of some of the ice buildup, and this was consistent across a lot of our area as well. I know that Director Pettingill asked a question about the weight, so I was kind of curious myself about this. So there's some studies that were done that looks at different species. The species that were identified at risk were the ones that we saw having issues. A lot of poplars and willows were high at risk just due to the wood fibers are not near as strong or as flexible. And maple, cedar, and red oak are also susceptible, and we saw the same kind of damage occur to those where limbs were broken off trees or trees came down altogether. The weight for about half an inch of ice increases the weight of a branch by about 3 times its original weight, and if you have an inch, it increases to about 12 times. So that's a lot of extra weight on the branches to support. Get my score. So the amount of ice that we did receive as an average during that rain event is 47 millimeters for the different stations that we had. That's about 1.85 inches. And there is a forecast as well that is at the bottom, which showed that the accumulation that was forecast was about 1.16 inches. So they're pretty close together. That resulted in a lot of ice on things and also resulted in the flooding concerns that Nate was talking about earlier.
It was bad.
So in terms of some of the impacts that we saw at the administration center is that we were without power for 12 days from March 29th through to the 9th of April, which I think was a Wednesday. We had no heat, no water, no septic, no internet, no server, no VPN. So obviously has an impact on the work that we can do. Backup power was also insufficient for our systems. They were overwhelmed just by the length of time. And as a result, we didn't have I would call a functional office that was able to provide the services that we needed for everyone. So we closed the office April 14th, and people were working from home. There was some interruption to services. We did have a couple of bookings which we had to cancel, and some of those are ongoing. So we're just trying to make sure that things are in a good state so we can have some of our bookings that are already scheduled move forward. But this will impact things in the CAs in particular as we go forward. And one of the big things was that resources were diverted from other program areas just to reduce the amount of risk that we had in our CAs as a result of this. So if you can read that, this is kind of like a little calendar of the kind of major pieces that we were dealing with up until I believe about last week. So the ice storm started out on the 28th, ran through to the 30th. And we had our power outage on the Saturday, which was a big day that a lot of the ice fell. We did close the office on the Sunday and the conservation area, this conservation area in particular, as we know is very popular. And our road was also impassable coming into the office. So we were able to clear that on the Monday, which was great. And you can see that there's a lot of cleanup. I have a plus there because we had people diverted that would normally be doing other things, and they were able to pitch in and over the 2 weeks before power was restored, be able to help out and like I say, reduce some of those liabilities that were.
Do you mean all sorts of staff were working on cleanup?
Yes. So we had, for instance, our permitter or planner was out and they were helping out. We had some stewardship folks that were out in addition to our conservation area staff. So a lot of people were pitching in. Our communication staff as well were helping out.
That's what it takes then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was great, and that provided an option, especially for people without power as well. There was an option to help out and retain some productivity as well. In addition to people that did have power, were able to work remotely. We were able to get a lot of services back up on the 10th once the power came back on, but it was interesting because when the power went on, we had every alarm going on in the building, which we had to tackle in turn. So the alarm was going, the septic alarm was going. I think there was a couple others that were going as well. So we were trying to manage that. Of course, the water didn't start up right away either, so we had to make sure that was primed before we could start up. And then our servers were back on the Friday. VPN was fully functional on the Monday after because our IP address was actually changed by our service provider, just trying to get things up and running. So we had to resolve that before we had access back into our server for everyone. And cleanup efforts will be ongoing as we go forward. So a couple of reflections that I had just as we were going through this was our adoption of Teams is an online platform and it's stored in a different area than the server. So it's a cloud-based system that saved us and retained a lot of productivity, kept things moving in different program areas. Our permitting aspects are fully functional on the cloud as well through a SharePoint service. So all of that was able to move forward. We did see that there was a bit of a hiccup because our accounting system, for security purposes, relies on our IP address. And as a result, Wanda and crew had to go old school because we had a payroll and we want to make sure people were paid. So they did paper checks and calculate things manually.
It's good that you had checks.
Yes. Well, yes.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So that was, kind of an interesting scenario that thankfully Wanda and her team were able to navigate, but it was something that we hadn't really expected. But certainly as the outage became clear of how long it was and it never did get restored before we had to issue those checks, was a significant issue for us. So greater adoption of IMS and services is something that I see would be beneficial into the future. So if you take a look at all the services that are cut off, at least something could work in any sort of scenario and keep all aspects going.
And order checks, right?
And order some checks, yeah. And so the backup pieces, I think we're lucky that Wanda has such a long kind of range of experience with us, being with us for 33 years before she retired and then coming back to us because she was familiar with that entire process and able to lead the team. Our backup power systems and generators were not sufficient for such a long power outage. We have a couple small generators. But they, in the end, they were able to function a few small items, but not the building as we needed it, or even a portion of the building. We were able to get the coffee machine going for staff that were coming in to clear the some of the damage on the trails. But a backup commercial generator, in order to make sure that we have a functional workplace. So like I say, we didn't have sewage or water. So we brought water in order to service the team, and people, everyone used outhouses at that point to manage the septic side of things. But there was no heat either, and we're just lucky that most of the days were reasonably warm. But if it was cold, it would have been a different issue. Okay, Mel.
Help me. No, the other way.
Oh, thank you. So another reflection I had was we really pivoted well as a team to do a lot of the work that needed to be done, solve problems, and it was usually through the conversations or innate knowledge of the systems that we're able to solve problems. But our current emergency management plan doesn't actually address in all scenarios this kind of scenario. So we really should update that, and not only from a broader perspective, but also kind of in the details, you know, how systems work. Because we did notice that even our doors, they were locked automatically with the system that we have. So we've updated some systems, and that hasn't been reflected in the emergency management plan that we have, or the details. So the deadbolts that we have on our doors become very, very important because we can actually get into the buildings. Without that, we wouldn't have actually had access to our buildings either. So it's I would say a good foresight that we had to keep those in. But when you're in the emergency scenario, you do kind of think about things a little bit and say, hey, you know, how do we get in? And then to say, oh yeah, there's that door, right? And then the other thing that was kind of interesting about this whole scenario is that communications through the Teams platform, we were able to communicate with people, but not everyone had power. So as a result, they don't have Teams, and therefore the communication network broke down a little bit, and we had to rely on either directors phoning people individually or the staff network to communicate with each other. But even there, we didn't have reliable cell coverage.
No, nobody did, yeah.
Which was the other thing. So communications was definitely a challenge. I'm not sure if there's a good way of resolving that. I think it's just something that you have to work through. But the other part was not everyone was available either, because they were responding to their own family emergencies or care that had to be put forward. So that was another kind of learning aspect. Nate was, I would say, humble in his description of his efforts in flood forecasting, because we didn't have power here. This was not the flood operations center. It was his home. He had power because he lives in an area that wasn't affected near as much. So that was fortuitous, but it really highlights the need to have alternatives for some kind of event like this. We also had power to our gauges were cut off as well. So that means that while we're in a flooding emergency, looking at issuing a flood warning, we didn't have the information that we could rely on through the network. So what we did have to do was actually visit the gauges to get a handle on what they looked like and what the levels were. So we were able to do that and manage the scenario as a result. And as a result, we were largely unaffected from that side of things. Conservation areas is really the big one moving forward for us, which we figure the cleanup efforts will take a while. I think everyone can probably see the damage on the way in on the driveway, but you can see here that we had a lot of people from the team helping out in order to address the hazards. We have a couple other staff on board too that has a chainsaw safety training, so that's great. So we were able to use their expertise on that. And we did have to invest in a number of signs because we didn't have permanent signs on trail closure or park closure. And that was becoming an issue from a liability perspective, because as we're cleaning up trails, we had people walking on the trails and walking right past signs, and we're felling trees. So they have their earbuds in, running around and, just not aware, or whatever the case is, but not being respectful of the signs that was up there, and certainly was causing a liability issue for us. And that's part of the reason why we had to get everyone on the cleanup efforts quickly. So this is what our driveway used to look like. Coming in, you probably see a couple branches that were sawed off, a couple that are, just on the outskirts, but this is what the driveway looked as we were just after the ice storm. And so we closed the gates. This is what a lot of the park looks like as well, in some areas worse. But we were really lucky, nothing fell on our buildings. We had a gauge on one of our propane tanks was hit, so we'll have to replace that. And we had a section of boardwalk that a tree came down and caused some damage. So, but overall, we were pretty lucky in terms of infrastructure. But we do have some areas that are not assessed at this time. These are just a couple of examples. That is a picture of our privies on the main, just across the parking lot here, and that is one of our trails as well. And the next slide we have is an example of one of those danger trees that's kind of hanging around. What we did find is when we were cleaning up the area on a couple of days, the winds picked up and we had to remove our crews because we had trees just falling. You could just hear them going. So for safety reasons, we pulled everyone back. And that's what we're trying to clean up. And that's actually the picture of our group camp road on the left and bottom. And you can't even tell the road's there. It's pretty bad. So we're having a professional service come in to clean that up. There's just too many overlapping pieces. And if you go back a little bit there now, you can see that's one of our trails as well. You can see the trail signs, but you can't find your way around it. So there's a lot of cleanup to do. And then the next slide then that we have is this is kind of the state of where we are currently. We're partially open at this point. We have the escarpment loop that's open and the dog park and the pond loop trail. All the other trails are closed, and as we're able to clear out the different trails, we'll open them in turn. But we figure that probably won't happen until really the end of summer, so into the fall. So September is kind of our anticipated date of having all the trails open, and we still haven't got one assessed at this point, so we'll see where that goes. Jeremy's Cross Forest is of course in the south. The south for us in some areas wasn't hit near as bad as Ken Reed was. So we do have the trunk trail open, which is a north-south trail between two roads. And all the other trails. We have one other trail open. I think they're actually, Christy, they're all open now.
As of last night.
Yeah, so as of last night, Jeremy's Cross Forest is open. Windy Ridge is, we have the main loop open, but the side trails need some work, so those are closed. And talking a little bit about some of the liability, Windy Ridge, someone actually unbolted the gates so they could go into the area, and that's that liability piece that we were talking about. So we're trying to get everything going as quick as we can, but there is some what I would call not paying attention to the signs and just doing what they want to do, which is like walk their dogs or walk in the CAs, but that does cause a bit of a liability issue for us. Pigeon River Headwaters, we don't have access until May really for that one anyway, because it's a snowmobile trail coming in. So that usually opens up in May, so that has not been assessed yet. And Fleetwood is one that we manage on behalf of Ontario Heritage Trust. And so that one, we know that the parking lot was inaccessible. So it's still to be assessed in some ways, but we know that there's some damage for sure in that area. But it's a managed property, and we have to have discussions with OHT on the cleanup for that one. So this is kind of how it looks like in some of our timeframes that we're looking at for the different CAs. And you can see that we've made some progress, but you can see that there's a few other ones that we have to manage. Tucked Away Trail is one that I haven't mentioned at this point, but just due to all the cleanup efforts, we are shifting the opening of that a little bit later in the year, which was originally planned for the spring. Then the next slide is a little bit on the financial impact, and this is really to date. So we know that this is an evolving situation. The labor aspect is one that we know has been reallocated to CA lands in order to take care of things. But there's a lot more work to do. We are looking at hiring an additional summer student to help out with the work that's required. So that's about a $12,000 item. There's park and trail signage, 6,300, which was those signs that you saw. There's also the park close signs. The emergency work on that access to the group camp, the one road is about 5,000, just over. And we had a number of tools, some chainsaws and things like that we had to work with, and that's about 35 in total. We haven't anticipated any of the long-term costs in any of this, but those are some of the early costs that we're seeing on this. And thankfully, we don't have to rely on signage all the time. Sometimes nature puts up its own signs. Yeah.
Mark, I mean, the city's going to apply to the province. Do we have any facility to do that? Like, is there any possibilities? I guess maybe reaching out through the city, or I'm not sure the route, but
yeah, I think
it looks like we're probably going to need some help.
Yes, I agree. It would be nice to get some funding from the province on this. I think that's something that we could probably put forward as an ask and see how they respond. There's no formal pot of money that we as CAs have with the province that deals with anything like this.
Yeah.
So we don't have a natural kind of recourse on this.
I would reach out to the mayor.
Yeah, but I agree, chatting with our municipal folks to see if there's some way to get some funding on that end. And there is a couple of grants that we're looking at as well in order to see whether or not they would qualify for this. And our foundation is also active. We're going to have a spring fling event, as it's called, to raise some funds. And hopefully some of those funds could be redirected to cleanup efforts as well. So lots of pieces I think that we have that might help out a little bit, but in the end, yeah, I don't think it'll cover off every single aspect.
No.
Any bit it helps for sure.
Okay, Tracy?
Thank you, through you. Just wondering, a lot of these conservation areas are in Ward 8. If there's any messaging that you can forward to me as well, I'll make sure that I post as well, because it's a very active group down there. And at least I can get the word out too that, these are not safe trails. I've been working with Ganaraska Conservation as well on updates because of having Ganaraska Forest at the bottom end of the ward as well. That was one of the requests I had. So if we can just send me anything like that, that way I can get the message out as well.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's good. Okay, any other questions? Priya, yes?
Are there some staff who will be constantly chipping away at this until it's done, or?
Literally.
Yeah, I think there's realistically, we have a couple of conservation area techs and they'll be focused on that. When we have our seasonal crew come on, that'll be a big piece of their focus as well. And we're lucky enough this year that we had some really good qualified candidates and we're able to fill the roster. In terms of other staff participating, it might be the odd day here and there at best. But not as concerted an effort because everyone has work to do.
Yeah.
So if there is a day that they could spare, I'm sure that conservation areas crew would be glad to have them. But yeah, we don't have a lot of people that can assist in that way. But we are putting out feelers as well to anyone that can help. So I have a couple of CAs that might be able to offer some assistance, as we go, as we kind of try and clean up this over time. And there might be some other options that we look at. I know that there's those big chippers as well. The city might be able to help out on that front too. So we're definitely trying to figure out the ways that we can do it, but we also have to manage, kind of our small crew and try to fit it in as well. So
Is it too complicated to use volunteers?
it's an
Yeah, insurance.
interesting, it's the liability piece.
Yeah.
So.
Risk.
I'm
Yes,
sure there's some really good people out there with chainsaws and stuff, but
yeah,
And big chippers.
yeah.
big chippers, yeah. I have a chainsaw.
Me too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions of Mark? Okay, can I have a motion to receive his presentation on the ice storm impact? Tracy and Mark, all in favor? Carried, good. Okay, so, we're on to 6.3 is hearing procedures. Christie. I just thought we may have a hearing in the next month or two, so it's a rarity. So I thought maybe we'd have an update on the process again.
Chair, and through you. As you mentioned, are anticipating that we're going to be having a hearing in the coming months. So thought it was a great opportunity for us to just revisit some of the hearing proceedings. So it's fresh in your mind, and certainly we can provide any support and advice as we move through, so. Thank you. We'll just do it this way. So I'm just gonna give you a sort of a rough rundown on the permitting process and really sort of discuss briefly how the hearing piece fits into it. So we're not gonna touch a whole lot on the permitting process, but just so you understand where the hearings fit into that process, and then going into more detail with regards to what is a hearing board, what are the processes and the procedures that we need to follow when that happens. Here, that is hard to read. So what you can't read on the screen there is, I'll get up here. So this here says permitting application. Essentially, when a permit comes in, we review it according to the board policies that you have approved. We take a look at the permit application and review it from that process. And then from there, we decide if the process fits within our policies, if the application fits within our policies, then it just goes to staff. Staff work through the application process, they approve the permit, and it goes out the door to the applicant. If for whatever reason, the application does not conform to the policies that the board has approved, then the staff have to bring it to the board for approval. So staff do not have the authority to refuse a permit. And in certain circumstances, they don't have the authority to approve a permit if it's outside of our policy. So we would bring it to the board for approval, and I think we might actually have one of those today, so you'll see that process. The board provides a decision, and then we continue on with the permitting process, and provide either provide the permit or deny the permit. If for whatever reason the permit does not conform with our policies, and we think that there's going to be a significant impact to the natural hazard feature on the property, then we would bring it to a hearing. And when that happens, of course, then the board has to switch into a hearing board. And so we'll talk a little bit about what that process looks like. Hearing boards are the only ones that really have the board is the one that has the responsibility to deny a permit. And you can deny permits based on a number of different aspects, and we've certainly provided some of them here. So certainly if a staff recommends that a permit not be approved, it has to go to a hearing. If we're recommending that the permit that has been issued needs to be canceled because perhaps the work that's being done is outside of the scope of the permit that we had originally intended, it would have to come to a hearing board. If the applicant so if we have a situation where the applicant is contesting the conditions that we've placed on a permit, they don't want to follow those conditions and we can't come to a resolution, then it has to come to a hearing board. So some of the steps that we go through as part of the hearing process, so there's sort of some pre-hearing procedures that we have to go through. One of them is to make sure that we're providing notice to the applicant that it's going to a hearing. Most of the time that happens sort of organically through discussions. We recommend certain things to the applicant, but then we have to formally go through that process. So, our bylaw says that within 30 to 90 days of noticing that an application has to go to a hearing, that we advise the applicant in writing through registered mail that is going to a hearing. And we have to include all kinds of information and sort of outlined here on the slide. This is really for staff to concern themselves with, but these are the steps that we have to go through to make sure that they understand not only that it's going to a hearing, but what are the processes of the hearing? When is the hearing date going to be? Is it going to be electronic or is it going to be in person? All of those pieces have to be laid out for them.
Electronic.
Yeah. So when we provide the information, we have to make sure that any of the information that's coming to the board is also provided to the applicant at the same time. So if you think about it in the way of a court case, right, it's discovery of evidence. So if I'm providing evidence to the board on an application, I have to provide that evidence to the applicant at the same time that says this is why this is going to the board. At the same time, the applicant also has the opportunity to submit information that they want the board to consider in their application, and they would provide it to us and we would circulate that to the board. So those are some of the steps that we go through. We make sure that all of those things are provided at the same time so that people have all the information that they need to have. Does somebody have a question?
No,
Okay.
I don't know what that was.
Oh, okay. I'm the only one that heard it. Okay.
No.
No, not just you.
Excellent.
Can I just ask a quick question?
You sure can.
And so we are the ones that decide it should go to hearing, not the applicant.
No.
So through you, Madam Chair, sometimes it is the staff that decide, and sometimes it's the applicant
Okay,
that knows that they're coming forward with an application that's outside of our policies, so they're asking for a hearing.
and the actual hearing board, the tribunal, is it a properly, is it a provincial tribunal under the?
That's us.
So it is this board. So through you,
So-
Madam Chair, it is this board that then enters into what's considered a hearing board. So you become a legal entity having a legal proceeding.
But we're also a party to the appeal. Or to the, if so, we're both a party to the appeal and the deciding, like, I'm looking, there's no independence, like, we don't have an independent arbitrator.
So what would let me see if I can break it down a little bit
Sure.
and answer your question. If I don't, please
Yeah.
clarify it for me. If an applicant comes to staff and says, I want to do something, build a house on karst topography or whatever, that is way outside of our permitting authority, we would tell them, we can't recommend this. We need to take this to the board. The board is going to need to sit down and have a fulsome discussion with regards to all the information and make a decision whether or not they're going to approve it. It's presented in So it has to be presented in a way that's fair. So I can't have a conversation with the board and give you all kinds of information as to why I think or don't think that an application should be approved without the applicant having equal opportunity to state their case. So the board sits as a legal entity to listen to both staff side of the coin as well as the applicant side of the coin. And then they make a decision. If, for example, you decide you are not comfortable in providing a permit for the landowner to do whatever it is that they're trying to do, the landowner then actually has, within 90 days of receiving that information, they have the opportunity to then take it to the Ontario Land Tribunal
Okay.
as an appeal. So there is a
So we
follow-up
do have
procedure.
that follow, so this is more of an informal process.
That's right.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. It's a really good question and it's kind of confusing because you're right. We are a party to the proceeding at the same time.
Well,
we
yeah,
are-
it's just inherently unfair from, I was, on the advisory board of the Environmental Land Tribunals. The tribunal process was a big part of my work, so.
Right.
That's where my question's coming from, but if we ultimately, we're not the final say.
Correct.
Then I'm perfectly fine. Okay, good, thank you.
Absolutely.
Unless we approve it.
Unless
Of
you're.
course, yeah, no, it's similar to, in another thing, but I did property tax or property assessment appeals. And before you go to a full appeal, you have a process between MPAC and the taxpayer. And it's a formalized process called a request for reconsideration, but it's far less formal than an actual tribunal. So that's what it's similar to that here. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I can elaborate a little bit more on the structure.
Yeah.
So the way it's the Conservation Authorities Act and the regs are structured is that the authority is the body that makes permit decisions, which is this board.
Sure.
So this board always approves permits.
Mhm.
And so on the simpler end, the board has said, we delegate that responsibility to staff if it meets the policies
Yep.
or within these parameters.
Sure.
And outside of that, that's where we bring permits to the board for decisions. If we agree with the proposal that will have a minimal impact on natural hazards, then that's the item that you see on the agenda today, where we think there should be no discussion on the file. Because it should match the intent of the regulation. Where hearing comes in is where we think there's gonna actually be discussion on, and maybe significant discussion on a file.
Yeah.
And so that's still the board as a decision maker on permits.
And the actual deciding tribunal, which one is it?
So this would be the approval of a permit.
Yes.
By the authority. And the appeal would be made through that provincial Ontario Land Tribunal
Okay.
process. And that's
Sure.
the appeal mechanism.
And if it goes that far, we would typically have legal counsel.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm just aware of the time and I know we have a source water protection meeting. I don't know if we want to pause this presentation and pick it up after that, or if you want me to try and ram this in.
It's your call. Do you think you can do it? Let's see.
Probably not.
No, okay, so we'll pause then and we'll take a break until well, it's almost 2 now, so. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Come back afterwards.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's a good question. I've only been, I've been on Kawartha Conservation on and off for years, but I've only been through 2 in all the years. And one was turned down, Mariposa, yeah. And the other one was approved. But I don't know if Tell me when you're ready,
Yes.
Mel. Okay. We would like to acknowledge that many Indigenous nations have longstanding relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which we are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that our watershed forms a part of the treaty and traditional territory of the southeastern Anishinaabeg. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we live and work. To honor this legacy, we commit to being stewards of the natural environment and undertake to have a relationship of respect with our treaty partners. Okay, so welcome, everyone.
Madam Chair, we should probably wait for Peter Franson to.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so we don't have quorum. Okay, we're just going to wait for a couple minutes for one of our directors to come back from our break. So, yeah.
We should take turns reading it so that it's fresh and we all get a chance to read it and feel it and not just make it rote.
I know it should change. Yeah,
Yeah. Might do that and change it.
yeah. I agree with you. The road thing, it's like, why even do it if it becomes road? That's what I'm saying. Okay, we're back. Okay, so can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Kriya and Peter, all in favor? Carried. Good. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? None seen. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of March 27th, 2025, please? Jerry and Peter, all in favor? Carried. Any business arising from the minutes? None seen. Okay, so we're on to 5, presentation rural source water protection pilot project. And we welcome Terry Reese, who's Source Water Protection Committee representative, and he's former executive director of the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Association. And he's joining us virtually. Hello, Terry.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. I'm going to share some pictures because it's a lot more interesting if I can do that, I think.
Great.
Let me know if you can see that. How are we doing?
Blow it up.
Just bear with me for a second here. Thanks for the invite today, Sarah, and for all of you spare a few minutes to just hear me chat about this, or let's do this from the beginning. How's that look?
That's great. That's good.
Great. So yeah, thanks again for welcoming me or giving me a few minutes today. As you mentioned, I'm on the Source Water Protection Committee for the Trent Conservation Coalition, and I've been there for, I was trying to figure out how long. I think it's 18 years, but I'm starting to forget. Hundreds of meetings anyway, so I've been really pleased to be there as a volunteer member of that committee and as a waterfront property owner representative. That's my sort of official handle. Partly because I own watershed waterfront property in Havelock, Belmont, Methuen, and Peterborough County, but also again as a past executive director of FOCA, the Federation of Ontario Cottagers. So that was sort of how I got roped into this in the first place, and it's a long-standing passion of mine. I will say I was thinking back to the Clean Water Act and its beginnings, and I was at a table of municipal representatives, mostly from Haliburton, in about 2005 when they were sketching out the beginnings of the Clean Water Act. And I remember the reaction quite vividly, that it was a lot of anxiety about how this was going to work in dispersed populations with municipalities that are stretched with their capacity, and how are we going to protect the water and don't give us a whole bunch of rules that we can't possibly follow and technical requirements that we can't possibly follow. So that was a long-standing sort of thought in my mind about protecting the water of Ontario that's so vast, and people that are dispersed all over the place, and especially through this area. So this is sort of what I'm going to cover. I've got about 10 minutes, I think, to do this. So I'll hopefully be able to take a couple of questions if you have any. Just wanted to quickly talk about where it came from. You know about source water protection because you're on the SPA. Talk about this project, which was done through FOCA and with some funding from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and then talk about where we're going from here. So that's me, and there's a nice sign that you'll recognize somewhere out on the landscape in our neighborhood. So really the project speaks to the source protection part of the multi-barrier approach. So it's all about how do we look out for the water that we all use and rely on for our family's health and for our economy and our recreation and our community use. And this I've been at this a long time. I spoke to the Walkerton Inquiry in their public consultation phase, and my story hasn't changed that we have to, all of the water of Ontario is important, not just the water that goes into a municipal pipe. So getting there is always been the trick. So we're trying to get there. You'll know this is the area that we're involved with through the TCC. It's just one of the many groups that are groupings of municipalities and geography that's looking at this. And you'll appreciate, of course, how complex this area is that we're looking at through TCC. And specifically into this discussion today that, you know, right from the beginning, it was quite apparent that notwithstanding that there's 50 plus systems that we're looking at, technical and a geographical challenge to assess and protect all of those things through the various policies and land use and other tools. Half of the people in this geography aren't within or don't use municipal water and are outside of the protections that the Clean Water Act provides. So I'm a big fan of the great work that the Clean Water Act has been able to provide for municipal water users, but there are some gaps. 3 million people in Ontario still. So that's the thing that we've been trying to get at. You know, I've written pretty extensively on this. This was an article that was in the Water Canada magazine a couple of years ago. It was perspective from Canadian Environmental Law Association, Teresa McClenahan and myself, just about the things that are yet to be done and that were still part of O'Connor's vision about protecting our water. And it was never just about municipal water. So again, this is the tricky nut that we're all trying to get at. So recognizing MECP recognized that there was still gaps and there was people that weren't covered by the great work of the committees and the Clean Water Act and all the SPAs and all the considerable work that gone on that you know about. So they did introduce or launch these best practices for source water protection, which was a great list of things you can do to consider what the state of your water is, what risks it might face, and how to prevent them. Really, it's quite a laundry list of things that you can do and a good start. But we always thought it was a little impractical for a non-technical group or set of people to really use these to great effect. So. You know, this is the kind of thing that comes out of a typical plan, which is quite, you know, setting terms of reference, doing some technical assessments, setting out a plan, and then implementing it through policies and other things. So it's quite a task, and you'll appreciate how much effort's gone into your local plan. So doing that just as a volunteer group is quite a challenge. And coming up with the kind of technical wherewithal that we get from our assessment reports is something we're trying to figure out what to do. So with the advice of Mark and many thanks to Mark, haven't thanked you enough, and I think I owe you some sort of a lunch or something. We did work with a group that he identified, which was a lake group that was a member of our association, the FOCA Association, which was the Kinmount Park Estates Association near on Crago Lake. So we approached them at Mark's suggestion because they were an active group that had some inclination and ongoing volunteer interest in their water. So this is where they're at. This is the bottom end of the Burton River here. They're just to the direct west of Kinmount. So they're part of the Burnt River watershed, just at the very top end of the city and just below the township of Minden Hills and Haliburton. So that's sort of what the lake looks like, and this was some of the maps that we ended up producing as a part of the study. So mapping out their little sub watershed to figure out where the contributing area of water was, figuring out where the people were, and then finding out what we could about the area and how it influenced, how it impacted and influenced drinking water for residents in the area. So this was I will say this was a map-based exercise and a windshield kind of a survey. So this didn't involve a lot of on-the-ground surveying, shovels in the ground, measurements, gauging, and that sort of a thing. The whole study was prefaced on using available public data and whatever sources we could get a hold of to put together what was going to be basically the bulk of what a normal source protection plan would look like. Source protection light, if you will. So there is one of the examples we used when we first started talking to the community was this is what a source protection plan for a municipal system looks like when it's included in a plan. So this is nearby the Kinmount system where there's a intake protection zone for the source water intake on the Burnt River. So just to give the notion about, again, this was really right from the beginning and increasingly as we learned as we went along, really about engaging the public, about thinking about their water, appreciating their and understanding their water, and then having the knowledge and information to protect it going forward, and doing that voluntarily and on their own basis. Because this, unlike the Clean Water Act policies that come out of the official source water protection plans that have force of law through policies and land use implications and that sort of thing, this was always intended to be a voluntary, discretionary approach. So none of this is going to have any force of law, but was intended to help inform the community's understanding of their water. So this was sort of what we did. This is we met with the leadership early last year, about a year ago. We introduced it to the community. Then we did an RFP we engaged a hydrogeologist, an engineering firm, Dillon Consulting. So they did the bulk of the legwork and mapping. We then did a survey of the members, which was an important data gathering process. There was a site visit, so the team could have a look around and get a sense of the lay of the land. Did an interim presentation, and then finally wrapped it up just a couple of months ago with a final report. So that looked like that. And so that report included a number of things, which is sort of, again, a source protection light. It talks about what is Craigo Lake all about, what's the landscape and the watershed look like, talk a little bit about water supply, where does the water come from and how is it used, talk about the vulnerability of those water sources. And then really the bulk of it was about talking about, if we know these are threats, why they're threats and what we ought to do about it. So that we can protect them. So we did a survey, which is, as I always learned at FOCA when I'm trying to engage community, when you're asking people things, you're telling them things at the same time. So you're, when we say things like, not an exact example, but when we say things like, how important is high quality drinking water to your family's health? We're also implanting some things in their psyche about how important the water is. So interesting results. 37, 4 to 5 thought that they were concerned about future water quality risks and sustainability. 1 in 5, and these are the kinds of things they were interested in. So there is no particular red flag in this community. They haven't tended to have water quality challenges. So they don't have a real heightened sense of it, but they're living on the water. So there is a sort of a general sense of community interest. This was interesting to us because we wanted to know where people got their water. So about a third of the people used wells. We know a lot of them aren't up to the current standard. So that was an important bit of information. Again, this came from public records, from the well records from the province. And many of them don't use their well water for drinking, by the way, but interesting to know a bit about what we know about the wells and share that with them so we get a sense of what the community exposure is. The lake intakes, which, cottagers many of them tend to put a hose into the lake and an intake. So that's where three quarters of them got their water. only 1 in 5 of those use that water for drinking. So that was also interesting to note. So just an important bit of background information about their sources of water. A couple of other things we asked was just, although it's not about water treatment, it's really interesting to know what happens to the water once it comes into someone's house and how they might deal with it before it goes into their bodies. So about half treat their water, half don't, and they use a variety of treatment types. A lot of people bring water from off-site, city water, or buy water from wherever sources. That's also sort of interesting. And then the other thing, which was a real point of interest and very typical, by the way, of provincial statistics, only about a third of them ever test their water that they're drinking. So though they generally don't have adverse effects, testing their water is a pretty fundamental part of the multi-barrier approach, and that comes up again and again in our discussions with the community. So this lay of the land, you'll know this because you live in the neighborhood. It's a largely forested landscape with wetlands. There's not a whole lot of, there's virtually no industrial activity and no agriculture really to speak of around the area, no municipal influences. It's largely low density residential. So that's sort of the nature of it. So again, following the model of the source protection plan, so we decided to lay out for people's perspective just what water might be, what part of the landscape might be influencing their water. So in the lingo of the source protection plan, that's about protecting the zone around your intake. So we basically took the direction from the best management practices, which is anything that's close to the water, within 120 meters of the shore, we basically said was going to be of particular interest. And then anything in the upland was also of interest because things that happen above in a secondary sort of situation, the stuff that was upland was also worth noting, but was less important. In terms of the groundwater, for those people who are on wells, we noted that the area is full of fractured bedrock. So that just generally, again, this is not detailed hydrogeology or anything, but just to point out that this type of bedrock tends to be susceptible to contamination. So that's just something that's general knowledge that you ought to know. And that if your well's not built to contemporary standards or is in disrepair, that can be a problem for managing your health. Then we use the drinking water threats right out of the list, and this is the long list of things that are prescribed in the Clean Water Act. It's basically sewage, manure, fuel, salt, pesticides. The list, and those things are all considered as part of the traditional and formal plans. And that was the sort of the same list that we started with to look at this. So possibly to no one's surprise, these are the things that came up as the top issues, given that there's no point source, there's no sewage plant sitting there, there's no particular industrial or agricultural activity. The things that are impacting the water are really things on the residential properties themselves. And that's the list you see in front of you here. So those are all potential threats to the water that people will potentially be consuming. So the rest of the report basically talked about why is this a threat, or what is the problem with the septic system, and why does that matter, and what might we do about it. So again, largely a lot of common sense stuff, but also I think the process and what we learned from it was it's worth articulating for those that are interested, but also for those who may not know they should be interested, that there are things that they need to know about, ought to know about, and that they can do to make sure that they're keeping their families safe. So this is sort of one of the lists of action items. There's great resources available, and thanks again to Mark and his team and Brett Trugano and others at the CA, because we lean on them fairly heavily. Also with Keith Taylor, who's the project manager for TCC, was very helpful. But we suggested that if they did need further help, this is right in the wheelhouse of the work that the Conservation Authority does in terms of providing best management practices, advice, and that sort of thing. So there's lots of resources available. The report is full of links to things that have been produced by Conservation Ontario and the local CAs. So there's lots of information that was provided directly to them in this report, talking about best management practices and education, as I said. Lots of links and information about how to maintain, know the state of your water well and septic systems. Certainly a strong theme of testing your water. If you've got potable water at your tap, you ought to be taking advantage of the free and widely available public health assessments of your water so that you can be at least somewhat assured that your water is not unduly impacted by surface water quality. And then only a little bit about some policies that the Lake Association may want to consider, and those are mostly around the land use planning bylaws. That some of which are antiquated, and just probably could do with some revising, just because they consider some pretty broad and bizarre potential land uses in the zoning. Anyway, again, this was not intended to be advice about that, but it was pointed out the sections, for instance, that spoke to things that might impact their water quality. And so on the occasion that the city's bylaws were up for review, or OP or whatever, there were some sections of particular interest that they might like to know about. So we provided that report back to the association, in which they've taken away, and we got some good feedback from them about how much people learned about the project. I didn't have a slide about the results of the follow-up survey, but it was widely read, and we got great feedback about people's just appreciation for knowing more about their water sources, and also about threats to their water and what they can do about it. So that was quite positive to hear that information from the community. So based on that, this project was funded, by the way, through the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and they said, well, what might someone do if they didn't have the benefit of having a Dillon, an engineering firm to do it, and would they be able to take what's learned from this project, using the best management practices approach, and do something similar, so that there might be some broader application of these kinds of concepts that would apply more broadly, given the fact that there's never going to be enough resources to do this kind of effort, or certainly the kind of effort that's done through the SPA now for all of these rural communities. So the intent now, we've selected three. So I shouldn't say we, because I'm just employee on contract with them now, but Focus selected 3 lake associations that they're going to work with to try to encourage and support and coach them through doing a volunteer version of the Source Water Protection Plan, which we hope will be more universally available for lakes to do, that are inclined and interested, so that they can take a snapshot of their local situation and take some steps to protect their lake more broadly. So this is what we're doing. So we'll be engaging with these folks over the next couple of months to do some risk-based maps. Am I out of time?
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So that's kind of what we're doing, and then we'll include a chapter on source water protection in our lake planning guide, which is just about most of this guide, which is an older guide, and you'll know about lake management planning from the Kawartha Conservation, but it's all about community engagement mostly, and trying to prioritize community interests and identify things that are important to the community. So there'll be a chapter on source water protection in that revised guide. I would like to acknowledge that the folks at the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority undertook a similar kind of pilot project and looked at a number of lake-based systems. So this one's quite an interesting thing if you're interested in the impact of looking at lakes and drinking water health through the lens of a lake community. So they did a slightly different version using their own internal technical staff, which is quite useful and interesting as well. Came up with many of the same kinds of conclusions, by the way, but also in advance of some, and at the behest of some associations that were really worried about blue-green algae, amongst some other things. I just wanted to finish up by saying, this is always, rural drinking water is always a topical conversation. The Auditor General just came out with a report with 17 recommendations. This is just weeks ago, that said, we still haven't quite figured out how to protect those other 3 million people that aren't within the auspices of the Clean Water Act. And this was the kinds of things that they noted, to no one's surprise, but there were 17 recommendations, and those have all been endorsed or acknowledged by the two ministries that were mostly implicated, which is MECP and the Ministry of Health. So anyways, it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out in terms of on the ground actions. But this little phase 2 that we're doing, we'll figure into that, I guess. I'll maybe conclude there, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Sorry, I've just been like a machine gun at you here for the 15 minutes, but wanted to make sure I covered it, and happy to thanks again, and happy to answer any questions.
Well, thanks, Terry. I just have what I couldn't see on the screen. What are the 3 lakes?
Oh,
Where?
well, it's where are they? It's not public knowledge yet, but one will be in Haliburton for those of you who are paying attention at home. I can't divulge those. They haven't been advised yet, so we're just having those conversations. One's likely to be in Perry Sound and one in Tay Valley, I think. So there's so I don't think they'll be directly in the neighborhood there. But those haven't been finalized. They don't know it yet. So
thank you.
And they have, yeah.
Okay, so are there any questions for Terry? Well, thanks a lot. That was really interesting, and gleaned a lot of information from that. And it's great that you're moving out into different areas to protect water. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so resolved that the presentation provided by Terry Rees, former Executive Director of the Federation of Ontario Cottages Association and Source Protection Committee member on the Rural Source Protection Pilot Project, be received, please. Okay, Jerry, do you have a seconder? Kriya? All in favor? Carried. Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'll probably leave you to your business, but thank you all for your ongoing attention and interest. It's, if nothing we've learned from this process is that many minds make this whole process work a lot better. So appreciate all your insights and local knowledge. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we're on to 6, update on Trent Conservation Coalition Source Protection Committee activities. Sarah Lavoie Bernstein. There we go. Hi, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good.
Congratulations. Yeah.
A long couple of weeks. All right. Okay, so agenda number 6, through you, Madam Chair. Since our last Source Protection Authority meeting held on March 27th of 2025, the Source Protection Committee met earlier that same day. This report summarizes key topics discussed and outcomes of the meeting now that we have the agenda produced for review. So starting with the Chair's report, Chair Jim Hunt welcomed the new Minister of the MECP, Todd McCarthy, and is hopeful for more participation within the program because he's rather familiar with it, and the Chair himself. The Chair provided an impassioned speech highlighting the trifecta of tragedies. So this was Milwaukee of 1993, which cryptosporidium contamination impacted over 100,000 people. Walkerton of 2000, with E. coli contamination resulting in approximately 7 deaths. And North Battleford, Saskatchewan in 2001. Another case of cryptosporidium impacting a community of 7,000. And this further emphasizes the need to continue a strong program. Chair Jim Hunt continued the discussion on the ongoing period of political complacency regarding source water protection, noting there's tension at the cost and protection of source water in every aspect of political discourse, and stressed the importance and need for a robust source protection program within all political pursuits. So moving the updates to the Trent Annual Progress Report, Program Manager Keith Taylor, provided the committee with a high-level summary of the Trent Annual Progress Report, which rolls up the annual reporting for Kawartha Haliburton, Otonabee, Peterborough, Crow Valley, and the Lower Trent source protection areas. As we have previously discussed, there's 5 categories. So this is municipal progress, septic inspections, risk management plans, awareness, change in behavior. We do discuss this later in the next agenda, but this was also discussed in the meeting. And yeah, sorry, the changes will also be discussed in the next agenda item number 7. Committee members brought up the challenge with reporting on septic inspections. So every time that there is a new 5-year cycle initiated, so that's a new system put in place or a maintenance occurs on a septic system, it initiates a new 5-year cycle. And some municipalities find monitoring this moving target a bit challenging. Keith Taylor and Program Assistant Trent Boss mentioned that they would like to implement some sort of monitoring system to keep track of these targets and hope to have something in place either next year or at least piloted by next year. As always, the committee the lead of each source protection area gives an update of the status program implementation within their area, and these reports help identify challenges which the committee can support. They also include details of the status of risk management plans, current issues, challenges, any updates to Section 34 amendments, and positive progress or news. There were no notable updates for this reporting period. And moving to the Section 36 amendment package, as we all know, this was submitted back in December 2023 to the MECP. And initially, the ministry was unwilling to approve the proposed minimum requirements for the prescribed instrument policies. These would set a minimum requirement that the prescribed instruments would include reference to the applicable source protection vulnerable area, which the significant threat activity is occurring, which is not already documented or required. Protocols for emergency response related to protecting that drinking water source would also be identified. Keith Taylor provided the committee with an update from the ministry indicating that the Section 36 amendment package is still being renewed, and now after elections, they are being negotiated. I just got an email this morning. So since this report, 3 meetings have been held in April, and this includes 13 ministry staff, 2 representatives from Conservation Ontario, various conservation authorities, and project managers in the region. The proposed compromise is now considered by the ministry. The ministry understands the intent of the requested information, and it is been communicated with the committee that there has been significant movement towards approval. Suggestions by the ministry were akin to the proposed solution, and Keith Taylor mentioned there were more meetings to fine-tune the wording of the policy. And some of these points that were in my email today were a new requirement for the monitoring policies required ministry to provide the identification, as I mentioned, of the prescribed instruments that are managing those threats. And this allows us to know what significant threats are being managed, how effectively, and this will provide us education and outreach capacity to the people engaged in those activities. There's an improved wording in both existing and future prescribed instrument policies, an improved pesticide permit policy, a correction to the non-agricultural source material policy. And since MECP only inspects operations, there were suggestions made to split the policy implementer, one for OMAFA and one for MECP in this policy. So MECP members are reviewing at this time, and response has been promised in a reasonable time. If the review by the various branches goes well, we will have to review and approve through the SPC. And then Keith Taylor noted that the amendments have been applied, may be applied in the middle of the year, leading to some challenges for the reporting period. And so Keith may make a recommendation to have them implemented for January 1st of 2025. Continuing forward, the committee discussed the Kings Bay Section 34 amendments for a new well submitted back in December 20th of 2024. Keith Taylor has been working with the ministry to help the approval process. He made mention that the program analyst at this point has finished the review and prepared a discussion brief on the Kings Bay Section 34 amendments and the soon to come. Further discussed were the new wells that will need a Section 34 amendment, and this is Port Perry, Norwood, Grafton, and Sterling. Moving to the best management practices for other systems, Program Assistant Trent Boss provided an update on the best practices to protect source water, including work that has been done for future projects to the committee. The Rural Source Water Protection and the MECP pilot project led by Terry Reese, which we just heard, was presented to the SPC, and then that information has been submitted with the agenda. Finally, the roundtable discussion, SPC member and Economic Development Representative Faye Langmaid had made some concerns regarding the recent cuts to the college science program. And this is further discussed in the correspondence package, agenda number 9, as the chair and the program manager support Faye's concerns and move forward with a letter to the ministries and the ministries associated. And then that concludes the SPC activity.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, are there any questions of Sarah? Okay, can I have a motion to receive that presentation? Jerry and Tracy, all in favor? Carried. Okay, so then we're on to Trent Source Protection Plan Annual Progress Report. And again, Sarah.
Thanks. Through you, Madam Chair. So the annual progress report from across the region has been received by the SPC and collated into one regional annual report as required by the Clean Water Act and its associated General Regulation 28707. This annual report must be submitted to the MECP by the lead Source Protection Authority for Trent Source Protection Region, which is Lower Trent Conservation Authority, by May 1st of 2025. The annual report has been compiled at a broadly summarized scale for the Kawartha Haliburton Source Protection Area and the rest of the Trent Source Protection Region. And this was provided in the agenda under the attachment 7B Annual Progress Report. And this progress report is being submitted to the Kawartha Haliburton SPA Board of Directors for endorsement, which will allow the lead SPA Lower Trent to then submit to the ministry for the deadline. As mentioned, the report consists of the 5 sections: municipal progress, septic inspections, risk management plans, provincial progress, and awareness and changes in behavior. Each section is assigned a grade of the progress of implementation, along with an overall implementation grade. These are P for progressing well or are on target, S for satisfactory, and L for limited progress made. I'm briefly going to go over each of the categories, but to reduce redundancy from our previous meeting, I will note what has been discussed from with the SPC from the previous meeting in March 27th, 2025 for the SPA's information, but I'm going to highlight the changes that were proposed. So first, for municipal progress, no changes were made. All municipalities have established a standard operating procedure. 5 out of 6 municipalities have completed their amendments to official plans and bylaws. 1 of 6 is waiting for municipal council. A rating of P progressing well or on target is suggested. Septic inspections, no changes have been made. This is regulated under the Ontario Building Code, which requires septic inspections subject to mandatory inspection program. And then within our region, we are on the 4 of 5-year phase. 97% of inspections to date have been completed, and 52 of these inspections were done in the reporting period of 2024. A rating of P progressing well on target is still suggested. Risk management plans. So the total number of risk management plans established in Kawartha Haliburton for 2024 was 0, maintaining a total number of 47. 9 threats remain to be managed, and this is the township of Minden Hills. This is one of the changes I had mentioned. So Keith Taylor mentioned there are 2 issues that should be reflected in our submission, and this is the first, that Minden Hills is in a state of non-compliance. So that being said, as we discussed in March, they have now hired a consultant to do work and have taken quite a few steps in the last quarter of 2024 and start of 2025. Minden Hills is committed to keeping the SPC and the SPA up to date with the progress made. They recognize the necessity of updating their official plans and bylaws. Minden Hills needs to do about 8 risk management plans in total, mostly for fuel tanks, 2 being 2 years out of compliance. This has put staff and counselors at risk under the Safe Drinking Water Act, but the progress that has been made and communicated was noted in the final draft of the annual report, and therefore a rating of P progressing well or on target is suggested. Provincial progress, 5 provincial ministries reported on progress of 27 policies. The ministries have implemented 93% of the Trent Source Protection Plan policies. The remaining 7% are reported to be in progress. The table in the agenda package summarizes the progress achieved for policy implementation. Keith Taylor mentioned again at the SBC meeting, there are 2 issues that should be highlighted. This is the second of the 2. Although the reporting from MECP has improved this year, it did not provide sufficient detail to allow the SPC to determine whether the prescribed instrument policies are required to implement, nor if they are being effectively carried out as intended. Program coordinator stated the following. The report from the MECP contains a lot of information about the process, but is hard to determine exactly what is happening in our region. The report does not provide specific details where the threats are managed, located, or what specific measures were added to any existing prescribed instruments. The MECP has indicated that they will be adding prescribed instrument details for future instruments on the future annual reports, which is good news. The MECP has also committed to improving their annual reporting. So a rating for the provincial progress is still S satisfactory, noting that most of the source protection plans. Sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
Noting that most of the source protection plan policies have been implemented and or are progressing according to the timelines. The MECP's commitment to improving their reporting will help upgrade the score by the SPC in the future. No changes were made from the source protection awareness and change in behavior. We've done community events during this term. Road salt and fuel oil threats were a key topic of discussion, and a rating of P progressing well on target is suggested. So as illustrated in the summary table in the agenda package, the overall suggested status of P progressing well on target was approved for the implementation within Trent source protection. Staff are recommending endorsement of the Trent Annual Progress Report for submission to the ministry by the lead SPA by May 1st. And
Okay, well, thank you, Sarah. So resolve that any questions first?
Yes.
Yes, Tracy.
Through you, Chair. I'm just making a comment regarding the provincial progress, just getting the satisfactory, how, like, it doesn't affect the overall when you're all said and done that you're progressing well on time to target?
For the overall?
Yeah. When you're looking at the province, just giving you that overall S, like S for satisfaction.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. I'm a bit confused.
When I'm reading your summary of your annual report on your table, and the provincial progress is just satisfactory.
Right.
But everything else is obviously moving forward with the progressing on target. I'm just wondering, what's the benchmark on, the province being satisfactory and then moving to the progressing on target?
Oh, I see. I think the biggest thing is just improving the reporting standards. So seeing if what we've implemented, if it's effectively being managed, where it's being managed. And I think the Section 36 amendments are also a big topic for, or maybe not topic, but a big theme for the S satisfactory, because we didn't get great feedback from the ministry regarding the proposed changes. And so I'm not sure if Mark, if you want to correct me or maybe.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the piece there. But essentially, because there's 5 major areas that are being looked at, the overall, and most of them are on the progressing well. That one satisfactory is just a highlight that's pulled out, says there's a bit of work to do on that end. But the overall rating for the entire plan is okay. It's doing well.
Yeah, my only reason why it stood out for me is because it's, they're saying it's provincial progress, right?
Yes, yeah, and it's so it's tied back to the very specific policies that are identified in the plan that tie back into the province. So I think that's where a lot of the discussions that Sarah was mentioning with the staff and the committee on the policies in order to address that satisfactory rating are going on. So they're aware of it. And I think there's probably some acceptance that they can do a little bit better than what they've been providing currently. So those discussions will be able to, or, depending on the improvements that are made, we'll be able to over time make sure that the province is in a state of progressing well with the information. Really, a data gap is really what it amounts to. And so with
Makes
that data
sense.
gap, it's,
Data
Yeah.
gap.
it's, yeah, you can't get doing it really well.
Yeah, and it was a great presentation, by the way, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, so any other questions? All right, resolved that the Trent Source Protection Plan Annual Progress Report be endorsed and that the Trent's Source Protection Plan Annual Progress Report be submitted to the Lower Trent Source Protection Authority, which is a lead for delivery to Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, as required by the Section 46 of the Clean Water Act and Section 52 of the Ontario Regulation 287-07. Jerry, seconder, Kriya, any other questions? All in favor? Carried. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
I guess. Okay, so we're on to 8, and that's Mark.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. This is really following out the process that was discussed at the last meeting for a representative from the city of Kawartha Lakes to be on the Source
Yeah.
Protection Committee. This is one of those items that was affected actually by the ice storm and that we weren't able to access a few files that would have allowed us to move forward. But really, once we have a resolution from council that identifies the person nominated, then we're going to have to go through the process of achieving council resolutions from all of the other municipalities.
Oh, boy.
Because that City of Kawartha Lakes representative really represents all the municipalities in the source protection area. And once we have a receipt of all those, then we'll be able to move that recommendation forward to Laura Trent, who will make that appointment. So this just runs the resolution. It's long, it's several parted, but that's really what we're trying to achieve is run through that process and allow for a timely appointment to the Source Protection Committee, since there's not another board meeting of the SPA planned for this year. So
Right.
unless there's one called by you, Madam Chair, at some point when we do have those, but otherwise we don't foresee a need to meet as an SPA. So this would allow us to move through that process, like I say, in an expedient manner.
So do we have someone or does the,
We understand that there is someone
Okay.
that they have in mind. It's actually someone that was involved in the source protection program.
oh, good.
But of course it needs to have that.
It has to go through the
formal council,
process. So I'm not going to read that whole long resolution, so I'm just going, are there any questions? No, okay, can I have a mover, please, of this resolution, Peter, and second by Jerry, all in favor, carried. Okay, so, okay, number 9, correspondence, Mark Mikowski.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. This was the correspondence that Sarah referred to in her update of source protection activities, which I think was pretty self-explanatory, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so just a motion to receive that, I guess. Okay, Tracy, Jerry, all in favor, carried. Thank you. And okay, next, so just a motion to adjourn. Unless there's new business. No business, okay. Motion to adjourn then, please. Okay, Peter and Mark, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Okay, so let's see if we can catch up to where we were. I know you guys have been listening to a lot of people making a lot of presentations, so I'll try to keep this short, but any questions, just jump in. Going back to the pre-hearing procedures. Is that where we're at? Sorry, no. Yeah. Yeah. There we go. So the pre-hearing procedures, as I mentioned, any of the materials that are distributed, if they're being distributed to the board, then they have to be distributed to the applicant. And likewise, if the applicant wants it to be distributed to the board, they would obviously give us the copy so that everybody has all the information prior to the meeting so that everybody can speak to the information accordingly. The other thing that we also need to keep in mind is that the staff are going to be notifying the applicant of all of the different processes that are involved. Hearing processes are complicated and it is a legal proceeding, so sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating. So it's really important that we make sure that we provide them with all of the appropriate information. This is what they can expect when they come into the board hearing. This is the way the information is going to flow through. This is, that they have the right to ask questions, that they have the right to present their information and when that will happen, so that they're coming into that proceeding with a level of knowledge that the staff would have so that they are prepared for that. So with regards to the hearing, the information that's being provided at the hearing, we need to make sure that hearings are held in public. Okay, so it's not an enclosed session unless there is a specific reason for it to be held enclosed. There are some provisions that will allow for that in very rare cases when it involves very personal information, or if it's a financial or protected information that is being presented, then it would be in camera. But otherwise, all hearings are public meetings. There is no third-party status in our hearings. There's no provisions for third party. So third party would be the neighbor or a concerned citizen. They have the ability to be present for a hearing, but they do not have the opportunity to speak and present information at the hearing. They can, however, present information to the board at a general board meeting. So they can come as a deputation to the board meeting and make a presentation to the board in that avenue, but at the hearing, they do not have the opportunity to speak or to present information. I think one of the most important pieces when we talk about this, we're on the next slide, sorry. When we talk about the hearing process, the most important piece of information is that we have to establish a sense of fairness. Everything that happens in the hearing lays the basis for what comes next, which, as we established, could be where they appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And therefore, it's really important that we establish this sense of fairness. And we're going to talk a little bit in detail on the next slide about what that sense of fairness means, but obviously, the hearing board is obliged to not only avoid any bias, but also to avoid the perception of bias, because it's that perception that could get us into trouble once it goes to the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Another question.
Yes.
I hope I'm not being too picky.
No.
So the Conservation Authority is a party to the appeal. The applicant is a party to the appeal. I know that the Conservation Authority is represented by more than one municipality around this table. Does the municipality, does an individual municipality have any status in it? Suppose the individual municipality disagreed with the Conservation Authority. Would they have the status of the hearing?
Not at the hearing, but potentially they would be speaking through their member.
Okay.
But at the Ontario Land Tribunal, I'm not sure, Mark, if there is third party.
Yeah, the Land Tribunal has its own process. I can't speak to that one specifically on that, but as directors of the board of directors for Kawartha Conservation.
Right,
The fiduciary duty is to Kawartha Conservation.
right.
So it would be irrespective of a municipal kind of perspective. The directors here would be acting on behalf of Kawartha Conservation and the rules that we have in our box. So that is a pretty firm line. So there would be no party status for municipalities as part of our hearings.
Okay.
Thank you. So when we talk about the steps to avoiding bias, and I'm gonna spend a small amount of time on this, but I think it's really important that we understand what bias looks like. And obviously, any member of the board that is sitting as a hearing board member cannot be otherwise involved in the application. So they can't have had any contact with the applicant outside of the hearing board to, provide them some guidance or to act on their behalf to try and foster an application through. That would be considered a bias or an unfairness. And that means whether it's through a committee, whether it's interfering on their behalf, or if you have an interested party or the next door neighbor or anything like that, that might be impacted by the development or by the proposed development. And as I mentioned earlier, obviously everybody has access to all of the materials. So no new materials can be presented in the hearing. It's only the materials that have been circulated, and we as staff need to ensure that any materials that the board has received, that the applicant has also received those same files in an appropriate amount of time. And that the applicant is given the opportunity to attend the hearing. They don't have to attend the hearing, but they have to be given the opportunity to attend it.
Christy, they can attend virtually though, right? Okay.
Through the chair. So as a counselor, I'm just trying to wrap my head around this idea that I'm not supposed to know much about it before it happens. I have a problem with that. I like to ask questions. I like to have an understanding. So, and this is just hypothetical, but something's happening in my township. People from the township come and speak to me because I'm the rep. And then because I come back here as an impartial body to make a ruling on something, that disqualifies me somehow.
So through you, Madam Chair, it doesn't disqualify you to know about what's happening. What disqualifies you is if you would be speaking on behalf of the applicant during the hearing. So you can't speak on their behalf to provide information with regards to the file. You can only present information that was shared with everybody prior to the file.
But I could do some research so my own personal would have a better understanding of what they're going to deal with or not. Would that be out of line?
No, that's out of line. Yeah.
Madam Chair, I can explain a little bit about why that is because you would have more knowledge than the other members around the table. So the intent around reducing bias is you would have more information at that point than any other of the decision makers. So the intent would be that everyone has that information all at the same time, and there is an option to adjourn a hearing and actually see the site, and that would be everyone that would be able to see the site.
Yeah.
So that's just so there is background that can occur as part of the process itself.
Okay. So the other thing is that in order to avoid bias is to make sure that no decision is actually made prior to the meeting being had. So you're not going out trying to seek that additional information and coming in with a predetermined notion of how you're going to vote. You have to vote based on the information provided to you in the hearing. Okay. Perfect. So with regards to attendance, so during the hearing, we're all sitting in this room, information is being provided. If at any point in time a board member needs to leave the room for whatever reason, they are no longer allowed to participate in the hearing. They may return to the room, but they may not participate in the hearing as a board member at that point in time. Okay. And as Mark sort of alluded to a moment ago, meetings can be adjourned. So the hearing board can adjourn the meeting if they feel that that's necessary in order to advance the decision. So for instance, if you needed to go out onto site, or if there was a need to acquire more information and share that with the applicant or with the Conservation Authority prior to making a decision. So the board does have the right to adjourn and then call the meeting back at a different date or later on during the process. The main piece here is to ensure that while it is adjourned, we're no longer talking about that file. That we just sort of sit there, we don't talk about the file, we leave it until such time as the hearing board reconvenes, and then we pick up the conversation from that point. Okay. Yeah, you can, thank you. So information presented at hearings, this one gets a little bit technical, but it's basically, it is a legal proceeding, but it's a little more relaxed than, say, a court of law. So the process of evidence is a little bit different. We do follow the Statutory Powers and Procedures Act. That requires us to tell a witness that they have the right to refuse to answer. And that the applicant has the right to object during the process, okay? So we do follow that process, but we do also recognize that if information is provided, so let's say an applicant is asked a question and they're uncomfortable with answering, any of the information that they give during the hearing cannot be used against them in a criminal court of law, okay? The information that they provide does not need to be under oath, and we don't need to swear in oaths of before somebody takes on the witness stand or provides information. The board can receive copies of information as opposed to having the original documents. They can receive copies of documents. In some circumstances, should the board decide that they really need like a certified copy of something, can't imagine what it might be, but perhaps something came up and they needed that, they can certainly ask for that, but it isn't required the way it would be, say, in a court of law where it has to be the original document. Some of the other pieces, I mean, again, if they have legal counsel, you as hearing board members are not allowed to, and the staff are not allowed to enter into those privileged conversations. Those remain private and protected. However, hearsay information during a hearing actually can be presented if it's pertinent to the case. Okay. One of the other pieces is that like common knowledge information, so things like geographic location, those types of things don't have to be certified. They can just be accepted as being true and factual evidence. We don't have to go out and justify where that information came from or secure where that information came from. And as I mentioned earlier, no new evidence can be provided during the course. Yes.
Terry?
Through the chair, is there any punishment or penalties for anybody concerned with the hearing if they deliberately give false or misleading information?
I don't know if there's any legal, through you, Madam Chair, I don't know, Mark, if there is any legal repercussions.
Nope, no legal repercussions that I'm aware of.
The point that I'm hearing through this is the hearing before us.
Correct.
Right? So it is it is a formalized process, but it is from a legal standpoint, it's very informal. So that's why those rules, like I'm a little bit confused that there's even reference to the Statutory Powers and Procedures Act, because that should be applying to the hearing that goes to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but OLT. At OLT, the Statutory Powers and Procedures Act would apply, and I expect that the OLT has their own rules of practice and procedure. Most tribunals do, and they would talk about things like you mentioned, like having an ex parte investigation, like looking into things. There's no way in the world the chair of that tribunal can be doing any research in advance on their own. But I think that's really the point to remember here. This is really it's potentially just the first step to the appeal. Most of the time it'll be resolved at this stage, but so it's good that those rules are relaxed, because that does contribute to resolution. So.
Perfect.
Okay, carry on.
Sorry, yeah, great, thank you. So with the conducting of the hearing, at the beginning of the hearing, so first of all, a formal record is kept of the hearing, obviously, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those pieces. At the very beginning, the chair will have some opening comments, opening remarks, and that's going to be to identify the applicant. They will identify the nature of the application, where the property is located, call for obviously the declaration of conflict of interest, outline the hearing procedures, and we have, templates for all of those different types of opening remarks.
Thank God.
Yeah. We'll make sure you have what you need.
Thank you.
But yeah, so the chair will open up with those opening remarks to just sort of set the stage, make sure that everybody understands exactly what it is we're about to talk about, where the property is, why it's coming forward, why the application is coming forward. The next step in that process is that the Kawartha Conservation staff will make a presentation, and we will bring forward, the information, whether it's a report, some site plans, we might bring forward different studies that we've done, some photos on the property, those types of things in order to state the reasons why we think there is a concern. Then the applicant will have, an equal opportunity to present their own information. Of course, this is all evidence that you've already received because you would have received it prior to. That they can present their reports, they can highlight photos, bring out site plans, and have an opportunity to discuss their point of view. Throughout that process, the board has the opportunity to ask questions. So you can ask questions while the information is being provided to you. You don't have to wait to the end to ask those questions. You can ask those questions while the information is being provided. The applicant also has the opportunity to ask questions of staff, of the staff reports and that sort of thing through the hearing process as well. So there is that opportunity for an ongoing conversation during the process.
Christy, just at what point, because I remember going through this process a long time ago, that we actually adjourned and went to the property. So at what point is that at the end, once we've heard everything, that we wanted more information, that, it's good to actually see?
You can adjourn the meeting whenever you feel it is the appropriate time to
Okay.
adjourn the meeting in order to get more information. Typically, I would think it would come after the information had been shared and you require more information. It would seem the logical step to then adjourn the meeting so that you can go and answer the questions that maybe the information provided didn't answer. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Carry
You're
on.
welcome. So at that point in time, then we get to the deliberation process. So as I mentioned, the board can adjourn at any point in time. They can also adjourn and go in private in order to make the decision. So in order to have some discussions and deliberation with regards to what they think of the information. If the board decides that they're going to go in camera, neither staff nor the applicant can be in the room for that. Okay, that is a private deliberation for the board to have in private, and then they would call people back in order to inform them of what the decision was. The board is allowed to,
No, that's okay. I don't want to break you on.
That's okay.
Through the chair. So who would make that request to step into private? Would that have to come from the chair, or could that be any member of the hearing board?
My understanding is it can be any member of the hearing board, but Mark,
A motion.
I haven't been through one, so perhaps you can.
Yeah, usually, through Madam Chair, the chair would make that when it's ready for deliberation, but there's a free flow of questions from the board, on anything until they're satisfied. And then once everyone's satisfied that all the answers are provided, then it would be called chair to go in.
The ones that I've been involved in, that they were both 2 or 3 were in camera.
Yeah, they're all in camera,
yeah.
deliberations. Yeah.
Great. So the other thing to remember is that the board can reconvene the same day in order to provide their decision, or they can adjourn it to a different day and reconvene at a different time. And again, so even though the board may have unofficially come to a decision and they're not going to meet for a different day, they cannot share that decision with anyone until such time as the board has reconvened, and then the decision is made public. Okay. The board will have to obviously itemize and record all the information that led to their decision. So if you're having conversations in camera, it'll be the board's responsibility to make sure that you're documenting all that information so that you know why you made the decision that you did. And because that information has to be provided to the applicant. Whether you're deciding to approve it or deny it, it needs to be provided.
So you give reasons,
That's correct.
and that would be up to me to write that down because you won't be in the room.
Correct.
Gotcha.
It will be up to the board. So I don't know if it would be your responsibility or if you would assign that to somebody on the board, but somebody
You're it.
has to take notes.
Given, through you, Madam Chair, given we're pretty small, usually the CAO retires with the board in order to do that.
Oh, okay.
The other alternative is to have legal representation to make sure that that process is there and that
Right.
provides a more clear separation.
So yeah, you would be in the in camera part. Okay, good.
So when making the decision, there's a few things that the board has to satisfy itself of. So there's some guiding principle around how you make that decision. And of course, we would, share those with you again before you retire so that you have that information as you're going into your deliberations. But obviously to ensure that the activity is not likely to affect control of flooding, erosion, the natural hazard that happens to be on the property, dynamic beaches, those types of things. That the activity is not likely to create conditions or circumstances that in the event of a natural hazard, they might jeopardize human health and safety or the loss of property. And that any other requirements that may be prescribed through the regulation need to be met as well. Okay, and so all of that information will be provided to you. At that point, the board makes a resolution, and that decision is made in formal resolution, and that resolution will be shared with the applicant. The decision. So the board's decision it needs to be made in writing, in formal writing, and it needs to be sent by registered mail. Obviously, if it's the decision for no or yes, you can share it verbally with them, but then we have to go through the formal process of sharing with them not only the decision, but the reasons for the decision, regardless of whether the decision is in their favor or whether it is against them. And then the applicant has 90 days at that point in time to decide whether or not they want to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And then the records of the meeting. So as I mentioned earlier, we have to take records of the hearing separate to our traditional board. The staff look after most of it other than the final decision. It has to obviously include all of these pieces, and I'm not going to read them out for you because I'm sure you can see that it has all of the information that is required, not only the information about the property and the applicant, but also all of the evidence that was provided. So not only the staff reports and the staff information, but also all of the information that was provided by the applicant as well. If you adjourn and you go out on a site visit, perhaps Mark, I'm not sure, I haven't been through this, but I believe that any of the photos or any of the information shared there also has to be documented and included in the proceedings. And then the notice is sent to the applicant.
Okay. All righty. So thank you, Christy. That was good. Any questions? Okay.
I have a question if you can.
Sorry, Harold.
Yes, just back to one spot there a minute ago on the deliberations. It was mentioned that the CAO would retire with the board for the deliberations at the end. So does that mean that the CAO is part of the hearing board or not?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, I'm not a part of the hearing board. I'm a resource is all I'm asked to, and I can't take part in the any of the presenting of information.
Okay, so therefore in the deliberations, you would not take part in that either. Is that correct?
Exactly, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm strictly a resource to make sure that the decision is within our box, so to speak. So that the decision is defendable in the end, based on the tests of the regulation.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Okay. All righty. Any other questions? I'm sorry, did I have a mover and shaker yet? Oh, Harold, you want to move that?
I would so move.
Okay, can I have a seconder? Mark, all in favor? Carried. Great. Okay, thanks, Christy. Okay. So we're on to 7. Staff board meeting is called, okay, 8.1 permits issued by designated staff. Christy, again. Interim Director, Planning and Development Services.
Here you go. Thank you very much. So in front of you, you have the staff report with regards to the permits that we issued through the month of March. You'll note that we only issued 7 permits. Our calc timelines are looking a little bit better. One of the reasons for the lower number in March is because a lot of the focus was put on quite a few revised permits. So you'll see we did 10 different revisions of permits and trying to get those. I think a lot of people at this time of year are starting to take a look at their projects and they need some revisions of permits in order to get the project started. So we wanted to make sure that we were addressing those in fairly quick stead, as well as taking a look at some of the remediation plans and compliance agreements that we have with some of the issues of compliance and violations across the watershed. So as you know, I'm down a compliance officer, so I've been leaning on some of the other team to help me pull some of that information together and make sure that we're able to respond to those in a timely manner. So as I mentioned to you in the board meeting last month, my prediction was that April would be our turning point with regards to our timelines as a result of some of the staffing challenges that we had late last year and early this year. And even in spite of
The ice
storm and being, sort of offline for 2 weeks, I am happy to say that our numbers are starting to look really great for April. We're starting to get back on track, and it will be I think that will be the last month where we're cleaning up some of the older stuff, and we'll be back onto our regular calc timelines. So I'm quite excited about that.
Good news. Thank you. Okay, so yeah. Any questions? You read the report? No, can I have a mover? Priya, seconder, Tracy, all in favor? Carried. Great. Okay, now we're on to the more interesting one. 8.2, Christy again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we heard in the presentation with regards to the permitting process, this is one of those permits that we are bringing to the board for consideration. We have an applicant who's looking to tear down an in-water boathouse on his property and to reconstruct a larger boathouse. As you can see from the information provided, we've got some photos of the existing boathouse and where it sits on Balsam Lake. The applicant is looking to tear down a 61.5 square meter boathouse and replace it with 111 meters square boathouse, so considerably larger. Our policy that is approved by the board allows us to approve a boathouse up to 80 meters squared. So that's why this application is coming forward to the board. Our staff have gone out and looked at the property. We've looked at the information and the application that came forward. We've done some calculations with regards to the slope. So you can see if you were to look
What page is this on?
29.
29, okay.
So if you were to look at the survey that's provided, you can see where the existing boathouse exists. And the deck that's on top of it, they're looking to expand it back into the shoreline. So they will be doing some regrading of the shoreline, but it's not going to actually impact the natural contour of the shoreline because the boathouse is already on the shoreline. So it's really just looking at cutting back into the slope on the property. We've done some calculations with regards to the slope, and we recognize that it doesn't create an erodible slope. So it's less than a 3-to-1 slope that they're going to be looking at excavating into. It's going to have very minimal, low risk impact to the natural hazard feature on the property. When we look at our policy, we're looking at policy 4.5.2, bracket 29, which is in-water boathouses. And there's a couple of different pieces that we need to adhere to within the policy in order for staff to move forward. And there's only one line item that we don't really meet, and that is the size of the boathouse. And which is, you know, it's really an arbitrary number that the board just picked, right? It's like 80 square meters as opposed to 100 square meters.
Yeah.
There's no defensible reason as to why it's better or worse than. In this circumstance, it has low impact on the natural hazard. And we don't have a great deal of concern with regards to this application, but it is required to come to the board for final.
Hey, Jerry?
Through the chair, this is just me thinking, male brain. More the building that goes inland, would that make it more secure for any event that might possibly wash away the old boathouse? Like it's actually more secure as far as damage. It's not going any farther widthwise on the waterfront. It's just anchoring it farther back inland on bedrock, basically. To me, it looks more stable than maybe the boathouse that's been there for the last 70 years, I'm guessing, but yeah. Is that something worth consideration or not?
I don't know that it makes it more stable. I mean, the other one was anchored as well, and it does allow for the water, you know, to rise. So, but
Okay, Tracy?
Through you, Chair. So are they using any of the existing infrastructure when it comes to that underwater concrete foundation, or is it going to be all brand new?
It looks like brand new.
I don't really know. I'm gonna defer to Lindsay. No, Lindsay, if they're reusing any of materials?
She would say. Consider the drawings, the rendering, it looks like they still have that concrete pile in front.
Yeah, I don't have that information.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, looking at it, you would think that they would try to use that as an anchor. And build from it,
I would
right?
assume so, yeah.
Okay. No, it was just a question when you're looking
Yeah,
at it.
taking it out, like, how would you do that?
I thought, Madam Chair, when I was looking at the file, that they did say they were going to use the in-water structure.
There you
So,
go.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, good. Okay,
I have a question.
yeah, Kriya?
Thank you, and through you. Yeah, thanks. So did they say why generally they want it to be bigger? Then, but why are they building it bigger than what the regs said before? What's their thinking?
Yeah,
Yeah,
through you, Madam Chair, we didn't really ask, but you know, boats are bigger these days.
Yeah.
You know, they could just need bigger deck space. I'm not entirely sure. We don't typically consider that as part of the process as to the reason why they need it.
Oh, because that's interesting, because when you are, you know, on a committee that looks, you know, at housing and so on, what do you call that again? The
Planning?
planning?
Committee of Adjustment.
Yeah.
I mean, they always have to justify why they're going over, why they're looking for an exemption. So I think it's a good idea to ask why, first of all. Because I agree, like you're saying, this is having no effect and it's impossible to build inside there. They have the upside space, but I mean, is it really totally arbitrary? Doesn't this set some precedents? Isn't there a reason we have, you know, that there isn't an outside limit to how big a boathouse can be? It seems to me that there should be some justification from the person why they want it bigger. It should be known. Because then, you know, you do have these precedents.
So through you, Madam Chair, this doesn't set precedents because this is a decision of the board and the board has the ability to make the decision based on the site conditions and the proposed. So it's not like, oh, you've approved one that's 110 meters square, so you have to approve all of the ones that come.
No, it will be pressure. It becomes pressure when you see like hundreds of these in front of you over the years, then you say, well, our regulation is obviously ineffective because we've changed it so many times. So it does have some effect long-term. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but I mean, this obviously does have a larger footprint than the old one.
But it's
So-
mostly, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I understand that the majority of it is inside and that you're satisfied with the slope. You get it? I understand why it's before us.
Mhm.
But I guess I'd like to see because I'm sure this is the future and it does at the end of the day make the lake look different. And if all big boats, if all new boats are bigger and this has to change, then maybe the regulation size has to change. It's not just arbitrary, maybe that has to be adjusted. But I could just imagine hundreds of these coming forward. The same way you see it when you're on the Committee of Adjustment, space between, and they're all along the lakeside, along the lakeshore on all sorts of issues. So that's why, to me, it makes.
Well, thanks for that point, Kriya. I mean, yeah. I think we just have to move on. Either, we approve it or we don't.
Through you, Chair,
Yes,
if I could.
Tracy.
Just looking at some of the pictures, I mean, there appears to be some rot,
Yeah.
so they probably did an assessment saying, is it cheaper to build new or, and if you're gonna build new, you're gonna go bigger. I know I've had to do that at the farm where you've done, an evaluation on something that existing and it's costing you more to do less, and sometimes a new build is cheaper than a redo.
Mhm.
So this could possibly be, the same, and if you're gonna take it down, you might as well go with a bigger footprint.
Yeah.
So I think I'm approving, I would approve it as printed.
So you're making that resolution?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a seconder? Jerry? I just want to say that, like, you're saying that it's kind of an arbitrary size, so I will support it also. Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, 8.3 Lake Management Implementation Action Plan. Mark.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I won't mention too much on
we've
this
gone through that.
report, other than this is a follow-up to the presentation that Carolyn gave at the
Yeah.
previous board meeting. So this is the progress report on implementation for City of North Lakes for your endorsement.
And at the PAC, I mean, Chris Appleton brought up a good point that this should go to council.
Oh, yes.
You
and
know,
that's
with a
actually part
present,
of-
yeah, then
yes,
that's part of
exactly.
that, right? So, it's all good news. Okay, so can I have a motion to receive that, please? Okay, Jerry, Kriya, all in favor? Carried. Great. Okay.
Good looking report.
Yes, it is. It's like, yeah. Okay, so we're on to 8.5. So 8.4, sorry. Strategic actions update first quarter. Mark.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm not going to belabor this one too much either. It's really a summary of all the CAO reports in the past, but a little bit more detail. And it rolls up all the more specific actions that have been accomplished tied to our strategic plan over last quarter. And we have our directors available as well as myself if you have any questions.
There you go. Good stuff. Do you have any questions after reading the report? Nope. Okay. Can I have a motion to receive, please? Jerry and Tracy, all in favor? Carried. Great. Okay, now we're on to 8.5.
And somewhat selfishly, because my battery power is getting low, what I'll also do is highlight a couple of items here, but my report identifies a number of things that have happened over last month. The ice storm was a pretty big feature of that, and the communication that resulted from it. They were all kind of top posts combined with some of the hiring and stewardship programs that are ongoing, like the tree seedling sale, for instance. Annual audit is ongoing. That had a little bit of a slowdown as a result of the ice storm as well. And we're busy hiring for the season. Oh, do you have a plug that actually works with mine? Oh, yeah, that's perfect. Thanks. So, thank you. So that's pretty big for us right now. And the other item, which I certainly don't want to miss, is there was a Conservation Ontario meeting, an annual meeting of all 36 conservation authorities. At that meeting, our chair, Pat Warren, was elected as vice chair number 1. So congratulations to our chair on that. And Dave Barton, who some of you may know, he's the Uxbridge mayor, and he was elected as chair for the Conservation Ontario. Couple highlights there. The other one I'll notice is that permitting performance across all 36 CAs when compared against the provincial standard. Minor permits met 94% of those standards, and major permits 98%. So as a collective, we're doing pretty good on that. And I know that we've done, as Christy mentioned, I'm proud of our team for getting rid of some of the backlog that we've had as a result of some of the applications that we needed to process. And so that, as Christy mentioned, should start turning around really quickly. And you'll see that in the graphs that we have. The other thing I'll mention is that we have our tree seedling sales and water fund that have gone on. So tree seedling, we sold 10,400 trees, which is tremendous. We have the 50 million planting sites that are actually being planted currently right now. And the water fund is open until April 30th. So that's the end of this month for anyone that, if you know anyone that's looking at doing some environmental activities that match the criteria, then there's an opportunity for funding for those. And I think I'll just stop there.
Are there any questions of Mark? I just have a quick one. So have we had much uptake with the grant?
I'm glad you asked that, Madam Chair. I will have to get back.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm not too sure.
Okay, that's no problem. Okay.
Not unless Christy has an inside scoop.
Which grant would that be?
I believe
The water fund.
Oh, as far as updates on.
Yeah, how many people have there?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay, that's fine.
I think Danielle is still doing a lot of site visits and trying to.
Right. And what's the end date that you can, do you know?
April 30th.
Oh, okay. So it's coming up quickly.
So, yeah, her process is then to go out and work with the landowners on any questions she might have before she calls the committee together.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, motion to receive then. Jerry. Mark, all in favor? Carrie, great. Okay, and now we're on to appointment of our risk management. Well, correspondence, sorry. Just one kick. Okay, we are correspondence.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. One piece of correspondence, which is Conservation Ontario minutes. They were brought, the highlights were provided. And their last years, we provide them as we get them. So it is a bit of old news, but they are provided for your interest.
Yeah. Okay, okay, motion to receive that. Jerry and Tracy, all in favor? Okay, now we're on to appointment of risk management official inspector. Yay. Okay, Mark.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. So we have two of our staff that were trained in the provincial risk management official course. And this course is important because we have an agreement with City of Kawartha Lakes to take care of the source water obligations under the source protection plan as they relate to risk management official and inspector duties. So Sarah Lavoie Bernstein and Harmanpreet Kaur have been successful in their training. We actually have receipt that they have been successful in passing the exam as well. So technically, I think that second piece related to when it's been provided by the province, we have that. So it's really just that I am able to provide a certificate of appointment to the two ladies, if the board is so gracious as to appoint those two ladies as risk management officials and inspectors.
No, that's great news.
Mhm.
And they both passed. That's wonderful. So can we have a motion that Sarah Lavoy Bernstein and Harmanpreet Kaur be appointed as a risk management official, risk management inspector for the purpose of enforcing the Clean Water Act, RSO 2006, Part 4, and the regulation pursuant to Part 4. Okay, Priya, Mark, all in favor? Carried. Great. Okay. So we're on to 9.3, procurement policy utility terrain vehicle purchase.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to send a note to Melissa Creasy on this because she's been a key point on this, and some of the guys are actually doing the conservation areas. So I will, I'll roll through it, and hopefully I'm able to answer all the questions that you have on this. So we have a UTV that was budgeted for at 25,000. The quote that is our preferred quote is 25,500, so $500 over the budget amount. So we did have some cost savings on the tucked away trail fencing contract, and so we're looking at shifting some of the monies to accommodate for the $500 and any applicable HST.
Yep.
So that's the resolution. It really was the only bid as well that actually met the terms and conditions. We had 2 bids in the end out of, I believe, 6. But one of the bids had a smaller box size on the UTV, so it didn't really meet our current our requirements for the field. So technically, only one actually met that.
Okay,
And they're throwing in
that makes
winch
sense.
as well, which is
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, they're two resolutions there, okay? You're gonna move them both? Great. Do we have,
sorry, yes.
yeah, they're two,
There.
yeah. Do we have a seconder, Jerry? Okay, all in favor? Carried, great. Well, we certainly need it, that's for sure. Okay.
It's the most, it's gonna be the best equipment you'll ever purchase.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Okay, so any new business? None seen. Okay, any reports and updates from board members? No,
You better say happy Earth.
I was just going to do that. I was asking you guys first. Happy Earth Week. It's not day, but it's the start of Earth Week, right? So, yeah, that's why I'm wearing green and I got my little bee, got my little bee on there.
Like the future of the planet.
Oh, aren't you jolly? Thank you for that. That's made my day. Okay, so a motion to adjourn. We have nothing in closed. Okay, Priya.
Harold.
Oh, Harold.
Yeah.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay,
We always give the Zoomers the.
I know.
yeah. It's hard, you just, yeah, don't see it. Okay. Soon.
Pretty present.